Hi, my name is Alex Fensky. I am your Chicago Southland real estate investment specialist. I'm going to talk to you in this video about the three most important considerations when you're thinking about buying a condo to hold and keep as a rental property. So this is over and above or in addition to what you're going to consider when you're looking at a single family home. There's some special considerations with condos. When you're buying a condo, you're not just buying that condo, you're also buying into the association that manages and controls it because they have additional rules and policies. They control some of the money, they control some of your money, and in some ways, they control what you do with that condo. So there's just a few extra things that you need to keep in mind. They fall into three categories. I'm going to go through them here right now. If you're thinking about buying an investment condo or you need to sell one, please call me. Number one, rental restrictions. If you've been at it for any amount of time, you've probably already run into this. A lot of homeowners and condo associations don't allow rentals at all. Um, but even if they do allow rentals, there's usually some kind of restrictions around them. Some of them will say that there's a certain number or a certain percentage of the units that can be rented at a given time. Others will say you can only rent to a family member. Others will say that you have to occupy it first as your primary residence before you can then rent it out. So there's all different forms that these restrictions can take, and it's important to get that information before you really get, even to the point of looking at the condo in person. You need to know if it's rentable. Um, it's important to note too that over time these policies can change and do change. In our market area, the trend is for these policies to become more restrictive. Meaning we've seen a lot of associations that used to allow rentals now don't allow them anymore, or they used to allow them with restrictions and now they're outlawed, or they used to allow them without restrictions and now there are restrictions. That's the direction of the trend. So it's really important to take note of that. Now, a lot of people will ask, well, what do you do if you buy it and you have it rented and then they go and outlaw rentals? In my experience, there will be an exception in there that says that if your unit's already rented, you can keep it rented. But it might say that once that tenant moves out, you can't place a new tenant. If that's the case, which you would only know by being involved with the association and going to the meetings and getting the meeting minutes and things like that, it could put you in a tough spot. That's one of the downsides of condos. As I mentioned, you're not just buying that piece of real estate, you are buying the control of the association as well. There are a couple other policy restrictions that are good to note, but they don't affect you as much as rental restrictions as an investor. They can limit pets, they can limit control exterior choices like what color your balcony railings are or your front door or garage door. Those are very minor. The rental restrictions is number one. Number two is the condo or HOA's budget. Their overall financial condition is really important because that could come down on you if they're not doing a good job managing all of the money that comes in from assessments, as well as the capital improvements that they have to make. So obviously, if you have an HOA or a condo association, you have a monthly association fee. That's going to include generally some of the utilities, some of the common grounds maintenance or snow removal and landscape and things like that. So obviously that affects your cash flow, and you'll want to incorporate that into your planning. But the surprise can lie in what happens if they're not budgeting enough for the eventual need for a roof replacement or a parking lot repaving. Those are big projects. And if they get to a point where they have to be done in the next 2 years, and it would take them 10 years to save up enough money to do them, but now the roof is springing leaks all over the place and everything. Well, now they're going to hit you with a special assessment. And they're going to say, hey, in addition to your regular assessment, you now have this additional amount that you have to pay. And if you sell the condo, you have to pay it prior to sale. And if you don't, you have to pay it every month. And that could destroy any amount of cash flow that you had. It could bring you into the negative, and it can make the condo tougher to sell when there's a special assessment in place. And you don't control that. As an owner, you can vote at the meetings, but ultimately, that may be what needs to be done. And there's no way out of that. So if they're under budgeting for capital reserve replacements, they're not contributing to their reserve enough. If too many of the units are delinquent, that can cause a problem with you being able to sell. And there's some other financial related things that to consider here as well, like what percentage of the units are rented already. Even if there's no restriction, If too many of the units are rented, you won't be able to sell it to buyers with certain types of financing. So that can be a downside if too many of the units are rented. If too many of the units are already financed with FHA loans, FHA might not fund any more loans in that development. And lastly, if a single owner owns more than a certain percentage of the units, that can cause problems with resale as well. Again, that little list there, that's all more minor stuff. The number one thing is to make sure that they are budgeting appropriately for capital improvement projects that are going to need to be done. In most condo buildings, the big ones are going to be the roof and the parking lot. Sometimes there's other exterior things that they have to do or building upgrades, but those are the two most common. So number three is utilities. And this is not as important. These are in order, right? So that was number one. Number two. Number three is utilities. Know which ones are included in your HOA fee and know how that affects your rent. For example, if you got one condo that your association fee that you as the owner pay includes water, it includes their heat, and the only thing, and all the exterior stuff, and the tenant only has to pay their cooking gas, which is like $10 a month, and their electric bill, that condo would rent for a certain amount of money. If you had an identical condo, but in this identical condo, the gas for heat was not included in the monthly HOA fee that you pay as the owner, the tenant has to pay it. That condo won't rent for as much because the utility costs are going to be more. So it's important to understand and compare apples to apples when you're projecting your rental rates and understand that two condos that look alike and generally have the same features can still rent for different amounts based on what utilities are included or are not included. With single family homes, the tenant pays all the utilities, so this is not a consideration. Just something to pay attention to. So again, those three things, just to summarize, is number one, rental restrictions from the association. Number two, the financial health of the association, specifically budgeting for capital improvements. And number three, the management of utilities, who pays what, and how that affects your rent amount. If you're thinking about buying an investment condo in the Chicago Southland area, give me a call.